Lena Black Gemara. We are up to the Ayin Vav Aleph, and we had a very interesting discussion here when in our Mishnah, Rabbi Lezer said that a person can put into place like a preemptive measure and say to his wife that all the Nedarim that you are going to make should be, he says to her that it should be mufer until I come back from my return, my trip, should be mufer. And Rabbi Lezer says it's effective. And the question is, so what exactly happens? Do we say that the neder happened, but it tagged onto the neder this hafara, the words made for lechi, or do we say from the outset that it never happens at all, the neder? So the Gemara is trying to bring different proofs, different examples from the discussion between Rabbi Lezer and Chachamim, and now we are up to the Ayin Vav in the middle of the page. And we know that there's a rule that if something is tummy, a carcass touches what it cut vegetables or fruits, if they were mukhshel lekabel tumah, they were wet and you were happy, they are receptive now to mekabel tumah and they will become tummy. What happens if let's say if a carcass falls onto growing grains or still attached mechubel lekarka? So the thing is, what we generally say is that it's not mekabel tumah. How do we know? How do we know? So the Gemara tells us there's a kal v'chomer, and the way the kal v'chomer, the modus operandi of that kal v'chomer is exactly like Rabbi Lezer's kal v'chomer, which he said, if you can break a neder that's already existing, which is so powerful, surely you could put a preemptive measure in that it shouldn't happen in the first place. And that's how we are going to learn, because we're going to say that if you take grains that are tameh already and you replant it in the ground, then we say that it becomes toy. So surely, and that means it was already tamei, you put it in the ground, it becomes tamei. So surely if it's mechubel lekarka in the first place, it never became tamei in the first place, surely it does not become tamei. That's the kal v'chomer uses, which is the exact same logic that Rabbi Lezer uses when it comes to a neder. And so we see from here, but following that logic, that's what the logic he uses. But see from here, you must say that it never became tamei in the first place. When we say that if mechubel karka, the grains are attached to the ground and the carcass falls on it, or it's one of the shmeina shratzim, the 8 different rodents that generate tumah, fall on it, in mechubel karka, it will not become tamei at all. Not try to become tamei and then becomes tamei, because if it became tamei, what cleanses it? The only way we know we can cleanse it is by doing an act, be proactive, placing it in the ground and planting it. Here, it's already growing. So if you're going to say that it doesn't become tamei, it must be it never became tamei in the first place. So we see, going back to Rabbi Lezer, what Rabbi Lezer learned by a neder, that you put in a preemptive measure, it prevents it from becoming tamei. Obviously, it means it never. Sorry, that the neder should be disallowed or annulled. Obviously, it means there's no neder in the first instance. That's what the Gemara is saying. Inside the Gemara, says the Gemara. Toshma coming here, in the middle of the page, Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. Rabbi Lezer said, part of his argument, when you have already seeds that became tamei. Kivan shezaron bekarka tahidin. As soon as you place them in the ground, they become tahid. So zriyin va'imdin, if it's already growing from the ground, and then one of the 8 shratzim, for example, falls on it, like koshkin, surely it does not become tamei. That's what he says to them. Following the same logic, so it's much easier to you can prevent it. Shemamana must conclude that when he compares that to neder, loy chaylim, what he meant was, but not that the neder it becomes effective, but immediately after that it becomes an old. The doesn't it? Because by tumah, if it became tamei, then it would not become tired afterwards because you're not doing anything. Okay, so that's final proof that we had that what he learns, it doesn't become tamei. The neder is effective; it doesn't become a neder in the first place. Says the Gemara, Rabbanon l'dash kal v'chomer. This is not kal v'chomer, Rabbanon l'dash, and we are now going to introduce the same kind of logic where the Chacham agree. A girl, once she reaches the age, her father has a right to sell his daughter as an as a maid, but once she reaches the age of 12 years old, she's an adult, she's set free. Then, but now the Torah doesn't say up to what age you can sell. So the Gemara says, of course, you cannot sell a girl once she's over 12 years old. If you sold a girl when she's 10 years old, yet when it comes 12, she's set free. Surely you cannot sell in the first place when she's over 12. So the same logic. Now, the Rishonim want to wonder, why would the Gemara bring this case of Amma, talk about the case we just said right now, the case of Zrayim? Everyone agrees to that concept. So ask on the Rabbanim. You yourself also agree with this kind of a kal v'chomer, that if it were to prevent it is easier than to fix it up once it happens. By grains, if it's already growing, it does not mekabel tumah. Why introduce Amma? Just talk about that. So the Ran says something interesting. It doesn't delineate any further.
The Moshe doesn't really fit 100%.
Why not?
Because grains, as long as they're mechuber, they're not muksher. They can't.
No, it gets wet. You get rains.
So,
how do you know all that? How do you know all that? How do you know the one's attached? It doesn't get prepared. How do you know all that? So Rabbi Lezer from Kal V'Chaimen comes along the Ran and says, "What about the Chachamim?" He said here, we don't know if the Chachamim hold by Zurim Goyim. In other words, the Ran is saying is a possibility. They take a hold. It does become tamei while it's attached to the ground. How do you know it doesn't? Where does the Torah say it doesn't? Which is an amazing opinion because we always accept in Shas that if it's attached, it doesn't become tamei. That's something else. So number one. But then he says the Chachamim don't base it on a Kal V'Chaimen. They hold it's actually a pasuk. It says in the pasuk I call Zera Zrua. So they touch in the pasuk that Zera Zrua doesn't mean that you necessarily have to plant Toru. You don't necessarily have to plant it. Anything that's growing. So they say that the pasuk is being more expansive. But what's interesting, the first part of that, that could be that the Chacham hold the whole idea of Mechubal Karkas and Makabel too. And yes, so that's the Gemara. Says the Gemara, but Rabban was just about the bleeding Kalachim, but time to be learned. We would have thought that a person has the right to sell his daughter, even though she's already 12 years old. You know, so let's say, because once she's a Bageres over 12 and a half, the father has no control. But the father can marry his daughter off to 12 and a half. So if he can marry his daughter off, because he receives the money in Kedushin, maybe he can also sell her as a maid. So we say no. How do I know no? A girl that was already sold once she reaches 12 years old, so the Yatzachim main kasef. So we say there's two ways of getting out. One of the Yatzach she goes out free once she reaches 12 years old. But if she wasn't sold yet, you want to sell her now? Surely you cannot sell her now. If she's already sold, she goes free. Surely if you didn't sell her in the first place, you can't sell her now. So the same thing by Neder. If you can already cancel a Neder after it happened, surely you can stop it before it happens. So the Gemara, you're 100% right. Of course, the logic is correct. So you know why by Neder is different? Because it's a Gzeros HaKosov. We have a pasuk. Isha yekimenu v'isha yeferen. The pasuk says the husband now has an option. The husband heard about it, the Neder from his wife, and he has a choice. Either he can confirm it or he can cancel it. So we're going to learn. Only when you can confirm can you cancel. But if you cannot confirm, you cannot cancel. And we all agree in the Mishnah that if the husband says to the wife, I'm going on an overseas trip, all the Nedarim that you're going to make, I'll confirm right now, it's meaningless. We gave either that, we have three reasons. Or we gave the reason is we gave the reason because like a mekhatos, because he says they're all confirmed. What happens? She makes a neder that when you find out what the neder is, you totally disapprove. So it's as if this confirmation that you're giving up front is really based on nothing, because you could very well be won't be happy. It's like a key mitos, and that's why it doesn't work. Anyway, so since the pasuk says Isha Yikimen of Isha Kedanu, if you have the option to confirm, you have the option to no. And since you don't have the option to confirm because there's no neged, you cannot. That's why they argue. But the general principle is a good one. In other words, when you have a kal v'chaymer, if you have a pasuk, the pasuk is stronger than the kal v'chaymer. And therefore, when you go back to the Gemara we learned yesterday, all about a mikveh and everything else, all the kal v'chaymers that we brought, the Rabbanan have no issue with it whatsoever, because there's a pasuk. They decided the pasuk overturns the kal v'chaymer. And in fact, that's what, according to the Ran, that's possibly what the Chacham are saying to Rabbi Lezer. Not that they disagree with the kal v'chaymer, but they're asking for the mikveh. They're saying, why talk about the mikveh do we have these rules that we say that you can't prevent you from coming, you go in the mikveh, it's not going to help you, and you're holding your shedders in your hand, you won't become tired. It doesn't prevent you. The logic should be that it should. And the Chacham is saying, because we have a pasuk that says that even when the shedders, even if you're in the mikveh, if you're holding on the shedders, you become tameh. So therefore, what the proof of that is, if a pasuk overrides it. So we hear, since we have a pasuk, Isha Yikimenu, the Isha Yifirenu, it should override the kal v'chaymer, which in theory we agree with you, but not when you have a pasuk. Okay, next Mishnah. Now this is interesting. We're coming finally to the end of the Masechta. We're finding out details of which are so important. So till now we learned about hafara. We learned, who does it. Now we learn when. So till now I was telling you that hafaras Nedarim can only be that day until nightfall. Says the Mishnah, that's not so simple. Hafaras Nedarim, we can see the Brisa. We'll see the Brisa says that's so simple. Afar the done kolayim. Afar the done you can only do it that very day. Yes, but double. Sometimes you have more time, and sometimes you have less time. Ketzad how? Nadra b'leili Shabbos. She made a neder Friday night. Yofer, you can cancel b'leili Shabbos, uvi yom Shabbos, and by day achetechshach. Why do we have to choose Shabbos? Because why we choose Shabbos is to, as someone trying to say, we'll see more later. There's a whole discussion if you can be made for the Nedarim on Shabbos, because you cannot be mat in the Nedarim on Shabbos. We'll see, and from this mission we see that you could, because you're doing it on Shabbos itself. Also, we say Leil Shabbos and Yom Shabbos to teach you that, and others trying to say, just like by Shabbos, there's no question the day follows the night. Because when we say to you a day can be a kachim, the night follows the day. Right? So therefore, we're using an example of Shabbos where everybody agrees what's a 24-hour period of Shabbos, right? Exactly, anybody like it. So the same thing over here. That's what we say. But Yom Shammai, we mean like Shabbos, night and day. Okay, so the mission continues. So if you made the neder Friday night, you have to Motzei Shabbos to annul the neder. But if you made the neder, for example, of the Yom Shabbos, you made it. What happens if Nodim Chashecha? You made the neder 5 minutes, before it gets dark. Made for Achatech, you only have 5 minute window to annul. If it became dark and you did not annul the neder, if I found too late, you can no longer annul the neder. Okay, so it seems in the Mishnah it's clear cut that you only have until nightfall to annul the neder of that very day. However, Tanya look at the Baraisa, it's not so simple. For us, Nedarim, canceling Nedarim, Kol Hayom, you have all day, like our Mishnah. However, Rabbi Yasi, but Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Loza, but Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yasi, son of Yehuda, and Rabbi Loza, so two Tanoim. Amru, they say, no, ace la ace. You have a 24-hour period. Now, what's going on here? What's the argument? My time with the Tanakhama, why does the Tanakhama say you only have that day? On Makro, because it's clearly in the pasuk, B'yom Shammai, the day that you heard. So therefore, it sounds like until the end of that very day. But Rabbanan, my time, and these rabbis, we call them Rabbanan. Interesting, and that's a relevant phenomenon. What's their logic? The chsiv, because in that very pasuk where it says B'yom Shammai, it says over there Miyom El Yom. Knows if the husband is quiet when he hears from when his wife's nether, Miyom El Yom. What expression Miyom El Yom? It sounds like whatever time for the next day, whatever time this day, then the same time next day. So anymore, Tanakama Haksiv Miyom El Yom. What's the Tanakama going to do with the pasuk? It says Miyom El Yom. It sounds like 24-hour period. 2:00 in the afternoon means till 2 the next following day. Itzich we need it. If it would be only B'yom Shammai, I would have thought B'yom in B'layla Loi. I would have thought that the purpose of this pasuk is to tell you that you only have daytime that you can know the neder. How do you know you can know the neder by night? See, miyom el yom. That's what it says miyom el yom. To tell you from day to day, that means including the night. Normally, man the one with the other opinion, Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Yasi, who they say it's miyom el yom haksiv b'yom shammai. It says the day that you heard sounds like till that night. Itzich, we need that because ikasim iksiv miyom el yom. How many would have thought? Mechad b'Shabbat, lechad b'Shabbat. I thought the next week, miyom el yom, the same day. Next week, you have all week to annul the neder. Leifela to null it. See, therefore it says b'yom shammai. You only have 1 day period. But how long is that 1 day? Miyom el yom. So it's coming. So b'yom shammai is coming to define miyom el yom. Don't think it's the next following week on the same day. It means then the following day at the same time. Okay. Amar Rav Shimon Pazi. Amar Shimon Levi. Comes along Rav Shimon Pazi and Rav Shimon Levi. Ein halacha ka'isazug. Now there's two girsas in this Gemara. One girs in the Gemara is the halacha is not like this pair, and the other girs in the Gemara is halacha ka'isazug. The halacha is like this pair. And now let's learn the way our version of the Gemara is first. So then the Gemara says the following. And the problem with our version of the Gemara is the next piece of Gemara has nothing to do with what we're learning right now. Levi Saval and Mevek Ani Tanai. Levi wanted to do like these Tanaim. So we're saying Levi wanted to follow Tanaim, Rabbi Loza and Yehuda. Rav Hachi Amar Chabibi. My uncle Chabibi was his uncle Abchia. Ein halacha kaisazu. Again, two versions. Whether he said the halacha is not like that pair or the halacha is. Okay. Now the problem with the Gemara is the next two lines. Chia barav, Shadi. He would sit there and he would throw. What do you call it? Gira, arrows. Ubodik. While he was listening in to somebody who wants to go ahead and be mataned, he would throw arrows and be bodik. What were you throwing arrows for? Some say he was throwing arrows to shecht. He had it amazing. He had a bird there, and he would throw an arrow. And you had to be. The point is, you have to be so focused that this or this knife you threw would slice the neck exactly the way it was supposed to be a kosher shchita. Now you can imagine how focused he is. And b'shas ma'aseh, he was listening in to somebody. So the Ran learns pshat. The pshat is that he did. When you do a Pesach, you have to sit and focus. You have to come up with some idea. Had you known this, when you were aware of this, would you have done make the neder? But if you do charata, ask a question. You regret what you did? Now we learned in the Gemara too. Now ain't poischim charata. If you have charata, you have to come forward and say, "Look, I really regret what I did." Pesach is what we come up with. Poischim the Pesach. We come up with ideas for Pesach. If Rav was throwing these things, I mean, he was focused on that. So he felt charata is good enough. He would just say to him openly, you regret you made an edit. The guy says, yes, finished. And the same thing here is that Rabbi Bar Huna, Yosef V'Koyim would sit and he would stand and he would listen. Now, a normal thing, you have to sit and focus. He would sit, stand, all things make it. What in the world does this have to do with our Gemara? Big problem. So the Rosh has an amazing pshat. The Rosh learns the version of the Gemara and the meaning. Has another, is exactly the opposite. The halach is like these two people. And we're bringing a raya. And what's the raya? Rav would throw arrows. When we throw arrows, when he heard his wife make a neder, he would throw an arrow on the wall. And where would he throw? He was such good aim, exactly where the sun and the shade started and the sun ended. So he would know exactly what time tomorrow he has until, and he dafka didn't want to be made matzah neder straight away, because usually why did she make a neder? Because she's upset. He wanted her to percolate a little bit, let her enjoy her anger. And tomorrow, when everything simmers down and she comes down, the hill, and that's what he did. Because halacha is like that pair, and the same thing here. What do you call it? and Rabbi Rav Huna, he would sit and stand. What do you mean he would sit and stand? He would stand up, watch his shadow where his shadow ended based on the angle of the sun. He would mark it off, and the following day he would go over there to see the shadow and see where it ended. Mom is too opposite, but at least then it makes sense they flow the Gemara. Why we're learning this here in the Gemara. Fascinating. Interesting here is that it seems like he would stand. Now we know by din Torah you're not allowed to stand. You have to sit. So this is not really a din Torah, as we'll see in a minute. It's like he said. So he can stand. So there's a whole question if he's allowed to walk around as well. Because we have a rule in Bab Metzia in the beginning is we had a Shabbos. It's mahalach ka'imedami. Remember Ben Azai said that if you're walking as if you're stopping. So what do we say here? Can you walk around and listen to somebody, or do you at least have to stand in one place? But you're still sitting. Anyway, I'll come back to that. Tanan Hasa, we learned over there. I'll tell you in a second why. We learned over there, we learned in a Mishnah that you can annul Nedarim on Shabbos, the Nish'ol Nedarim. So Menfidin is a husband to a wife, a father to a daughter, that's called Hafara. And Nish'ol Nedarim is an ordinary person, makes a neder that you can go to a bezin and to be matzah neder or to Yochim Muncha. But here there's an added clause. Shehein l'tzayda Shabbos. When can you involve yourself on Shabbos to annul the neder if it pertains to Shabbos? Now the question is, these words Shehein l'tzayda Shabbos, does that apply also to Mefirin Nedarim? A husband to a wife. Can the only time on Shabbos you know the neder is if it relates to Shabbos, or when it comes to that hafara, it makes no difference. Now why should it be any different? Because when it comes to hafara, you have a window, and once you pass that window, you can no longer cancel the neder. If you don't allow him to cancel the Nedarim on Shabbos, she'll make the Nedarim only on Shabbos, and he's stuck. You can't do anything about it. So how do we treat hafara? We did learn last time that hafara works differently than haTorah. haTorah is retrospective, as if the neder never happened in the first place. Hafara is from now on. So because the whole method of operation is different, could be that the dinim are very different as well. Not just because we have no choice, but because the nature of exactly what they're doing. So, how do we understand hafara? Do we read as if the word Tzarech Shabbos applies to hafara as well? I did my Tzarech Shabbos is one part of the Mishnah, and Nishol Nedarim Shabbos, and Tzarech Shabbos only applies to Nishol Nedarim. Toshba Kamani, Tony Ravzuti Vera Papi, Ravzuti learned the name of the Papi in the Braisa. Ravzuti learned Yishira Papi. It says in the Braisa, Ein Mafidin Nedarim El Tzarech Shabbos. The Braisa clearly says The Brisa clearly holds that you can even hafara could only be on Shabbos. Now obviously what's going on here? So the husband will be stuck. What's the whole thing in the parish? We'll see in a minute. But our Mishnah clearly agrees. It says in our Mishnah, our Mishnah says in the second case that if you made a neder 5 minutes before Shabbos elapses, you only have 5 minutes to cancel a neder. What possible neder can she make 5 minutes before Shabbos that you must be made for it before Shabbos? Otherwise, it's going to affect the Shabbos. It can't be l'tzarech Shabbos. And yet it says clearly here you can be made for it on Shabbos. Our Mishnah holds you can be made for it. You can annul a neder even though it does not pertain to Shabbos at all. It says in the Mishnah, if she made a neder 5 minutes before Shabbos is over, you only have that short window. You can go ahead and annul it before Shabbos ends. Now, there's no way in the world that she could have made a neder then that really is important for Shabbos and you can't wait those 5 minutes. What could she have said? Usually a neder is I won't eat, I won't drink, but the last 5 minutes of Shabbos, you're not eating and drink anyway. So what is it? The Amid, let's say, the Shabbos in. If you can tell me that only in the Nedarim you can know if it pertains to Shabbos. But if it's not germane to Shabbos, you're not allowed to. So why do you tell me that so obviously what kind of neder are we talking about? A neder does not affect Shabbos. So why only 5 minutes for Shabbos? Even if she made it in the morning, even if she made it last night, you cannot cancel it. Because if it does not pertain to Shabbos, you cannot cancel according to the Brisa. It's not necessary. Says you're right. Tanoi, there's a machlekes between our Mishnah and the Brisa. Our Mishnah holds that you can annul the Nedarim of your wife regardless of whether they relate to Shabbos or not. The Brisa says the only Nedarim you can annul is if it relates to Shabbos. Now, what's the crux of their argument? Tonight you have fathers and you know what's based on. And the other machlekes we open up the Gemara. Do you have till Sunday, for example? She made the neder Shabbos 1 o'clock in the afternoon. If you hold that you have till Sunday 1 o'clock in the afternoon, then what's the rush? What's the emergency? Wait till Motzei Shabbos, annul the neder then. So that's the Brisa. And the Brisa ever says you cannot annul it on Shabbos unless it's irrelevant to Shabbos. Our Mishnah holds you only have till nightfall. So if we're not going to allow him to annul the neder of his wife, he can never annul it, and therefore our Mishnah holds you can annul on Shabbos. It's Hafaras of Dorim Kolayim. That our Tanakama says you only have that day itself to annul the neder. Therefore, we allow you to do it on Shabbos, regardless of whether it relates to Shabbos or not. But Rabbi Yisi, but Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Lazar, but Rabbi Shimon, Amru, they say me'eis le'eis. They say you have 24 hours. So the Gemara now explains. The one that says you only have that day and no more. Then I feel Shlomo Shabbos made for that. If it's not the gate of Shabbos, we allow you to cancel it because you need. Otherwise, you lose your window. But the one that says that we give you 24 hours, the Torah Shabbos says you want to know on Shabbos. Well, if it's necessary for Shabbos, yes. If it's not negated Shabbos, no. Now, why takanat? Why takanat? Why can't you be made for the Nedarim of Shabbos? Because it looks like a din Torah. Because you have to have 3 mumchim. And because it looks like a din Torah, we'll see in the Gemara in a minute. Let's go 2 more. I'll finish this with his piece. Says the Gemara, but it says over here when it comes to yastam, not a hafara. The Mishnah says if you're coming to a rav, you want to be mataned is Shabbos. Then it has to negate Shabbos. If it's not relevant to Shabbos, we're not going to be mataned. Now, we have a question. What happens? What happens? You had no chance before Friday, before Shabbos to annul the neder. Is that when you in other words, even if you had no time before Shabbos, come Shabbos, we do not allow you to know the neder. It doesn't matter why, or no. You could have done it Friday afternoon. You had no right to leave it to delay it till Shabbos. But if you couldn't have done Friday afternoon. There was no time. You couldn't get 3 people together. Then maybe Taka Yar Shabbos. You're allowed to be matanez because whatever. Toshma communities that kikule rabbanon, the ones that rabbanon involve themselves, lebrei the Rav Zuta, brei the Rav Zera, to the son of Rav Zuta, who was the son of Rav Zera's grandson. In other words, afilu bin adorim shahoyel and pnaim ba'od yom. In other words, if it's relevant to Shabbos, even though they could have done Friday afternoon, doesn't matter. Come Shabbos, it's a neder that's relevant to Shabbos. You would sit down and you would convene a bezin and do it. So Rabbi Yosef Lemeimer, Rabbi Yosef thought, okay. But you know when we're allowed to do it on Shabbos? When we say Nish'ol in the Nedarim b'Shabbos, it shouldn't look like a bezin. Is b'yachim umcha. You have two choices. You can either use a single person who's expert, or to have a bezin of three. You know when we're going to allow you to do it on Shabbos? Only if you have a single person. A mumcha. It doesn't look like a normal court case needs three judges. But but if you're going to convene three ordinary people sitting down, they should hear your neder, even though it relates to Shabbos, it looks like a bezin. Then we should not allow it on Shabbos, even though you want to annul a neder that, let's say you say you won't eat meat anymore now at Shabbos and you want to eat. It looks like it in Torah. Abai said, Kivan the Svir alone. Because we hold when it comes to a neder, we just said before, Afilu Mu'umid. We said before, remember, Rabbi Bar Huna stood when he came to be matzah neder, or Afilu V'Kreivim. You don't have to go to proper judges. You can go to relatives. Afilu Balayla, even at night, you don't have a court case at night. Only Gemardin. This is Tchilas. Then you're coming in and you can tell us what your neder was. There are so many differences between Hataras and Nedarim and a Din Torah that nobody's going to make that mistake, and therefore, as long as it's relevant to Shabbos, you're allowed to cancel it. Even if you could on a Friday, you're allowed to cancel it. Now, why